Parshas Yisro is the parsha of the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, and God Almighty speaks through and directly through to the hearts of every single person. The Jewish people that were there, the people had assembled and collected themselves to the Jewish people, and really to the entire world. That it says that the Torah was given in 70 languages. God Almighty's speech was divided instantly into 70 languages that every human being should be able to understand it. So we see that the 10 Commandments, everyone in the world knows what the 10 Commandments are. But we have to understand that the 10 Commandments, which everyone agrees in theory is a good idea, and many people try to say, well, let's just do those things without believing in God. The reality is they can only work if we understand that there's a divine commander, that the source of these laws is divine, meaning to say it's an eternal God Almighty that is beyond all of creation. Now, you'll notice that in the beginning of the 10 Commandments, it says, I'm the Lord your God that took you out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. If we understand that there's a divine creator of the entire universe, we would think that it should say, I am the Lord your God, your creator. And some people like to think that there's some sort of abstract God that created the universe, and also he has rules. But that itself is not sufficient, meaning to say we understand that if you take God out of the morality and try to have a morality based on a social compact and on people's obligations to each other, that will not endure. We see that that's what happened in the Holocaust, that the Germans took the God out of the public schools and created atheist public schools. That led to a destruction of civilization and outright violation of every one of the 10 Commandments. So we might say, okay, we'll put God back in, but it's the God of creation, the God who created the world. And that itself is not enough either. In order for the divine commandments to impact us and to hold us and to be able to uplift us, and for us to feel called to follow them at all times and all circumstances, we have to understand that the commandments come not just from God Almighty, as he is the creator of the universe, but as the God Almighty that comes into the universe, as finds himself in the universe, that the universe is found in God Almighty, and that there's nothing besides God Almighty, and he intervenes, and not only does he run the creation, but he runs the creation according to his will on a detailed basis, that every single detail is designed and carried out by God Almighty, including coming and taking one nation out of another nation, taking the Jewish people out of Egypt. So a person should realize that his actions matter. Person could say to himself, what does it matter what he does in this big universe? The universe is so massive, and there's so many thousands of stars and so many thousands of planets, billions and billions, and then there's billions and billions of people. So what does it matter if he does his job or not, if he participates or not? What does it matter if he is even alive or not? So Torah is coming to tell us, it's coming to be the God Almighty's divine communication that no, this is an intentional act, that God Almighty cares about the details, so much so that it makes a difference to him whether or not these people called the Jewish people, the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, are found in Egypt and what their circumstances are, and that they should come out of Egypt and they should come to Mount Sinai and go through the splitting of the sea and coming to Mount Sinai, and they should then receive the Torah of Mount Sinai. That is something that is a great detailed intention and attention of God Almighty, because God Almighty wants that message of the Torah, both the fact that he is personally involved in every person's life, and the fact that he's willing and able and ready to take every single person out of exile, both on an individual level and on a group level, and the fact that he has a message that applies to every single human being that's urgent. It's an urgent message, and therefore he is involved. He's not just creating a universe to run according to the natural order, that there's a star and the star goes this way and the planets go this way and all these incredible and awesome things that God Almighty has created. He is interested in the details of your life to such an extent that he comes and he is with you when you wake up in the morning. The first thing you're supposed to think of is that God Almighty is standing with you. He's ready to be of assistance to you to bring your day to fulfillment. He wants to know how you're doing, and he wants your well-being, and he returns your soul to you so that you're rested and refreshed, ready to have an engaged day of joy, and a great day of great involvement in his mission and God Almighty's mission in the world. So there's a tremendous significance to what you're doing. And when you understand there's a significance to what you're doing and that he's involved, and the first thing we do, by the way, when we wake up in the morning, is we express gratitude. Acknowledge do I to you, God Almighty, the King, living and enduring, that you've restored my soul to me with great compassion, and great is your faithfulness. So that my whole existence is wrapped in this awareness that I matter to God Almighty. And if I matter, then by definition, I have to understand that you matter. Every single one of you matters. It makes a difference what is going on in your life. It makes a difference whether you are in a place of tranquility and serenity. It makes a difference if you are fulfilling the commandments that apply to every single human being. It makes a difference to the entire world, and your welfare is of my concern, and every person's welfare is my concern, because I recognize, because if God Almighty is paying attention to me, he's obviously paying attention to everybody else. I'm not anything more special or different than anybody else, that I deserve more attention than anybody else. So if I, a simple person of mere dust, is deserving such intense, focused attention from God Almighty, then that means that you are too. So now the level of respect between two people is going to be on a completely different level. It's impossible to even consider coming to harm another person, whether in thought, thinking negative thoughts about them, or saying something negative about the person, or doing something, God forbid, harmful to the person, whether it's by stealing or competing with them in an unfair way, or taking something that's theirs, or coveting what's theirs. All these things are impossible to even conceive of. So the central building block of civilization, the existence of human civilization, which means the functional interaction of human beings to be able to create a ordered world in which human beings could prosper and grow and be successful and live in tranquility, is dependent on recognizing who the commander is, recognizing that there's an eye that sees and an ear that hears, that there's a God Almighty that's not only bringing you into existence, and not only bringing the entire universe to existence on a moment-by-moment basis, but how and what you do at every moment does make a difference. And if a person makes a mistake and goes off track, he needs to realize that he needs to just immediately get back on track, because returning to God Almighty is extremely simple. It doesn't require any external actions other than an internal transition to say, I regret having lost sight of the fact that I am completely one with the Creator. He is in creating me, and he's creating all of existence, and I recognize that I didn't live in accordance with that, and now I'm going to change my way. I'm not going to do that thing anymore. And you admit it to yourself, you admit it to God Almighty, and you just change your ways. That's what is the process of tshuva, of returning to God Almighty. No one else can do this for you. It's impossible for another human being to do it for you. And God doesn't do it for you because of that. He did it for you. That would defeat the purpose, which is it's meant for you to come to the recognition of the ways in which you did not fulfill the potential that you have to be in every thought, speech, and action completely aligned with God Almighty's will, to the extent that it is your only will, it is your only drive, is to do exactly what God Almighty wants at every time, at every moment. So this is what the 10 Commandments are coming to teach us. And the 10 Commandments correspond to the 7 laws that apply to every single human being. In fact, there's 620 letters in the 10 Commandments, which corresponds to 613 commandments that apply to the Jewish people, and 7 general commandments that apply to the nations of the world, which we've learned in our classes include 30 commandments, and not only 30 commandments, but infinite number of details beyond that. And we've discussed in other classes how the 7 correspond to the 10, and the 10 can be explained in the 7. And Shem, the son of Noah, taught others of the 10 commandments as part of the 7 commandments. So the mission, the only job now, is to bring this recognition to every single human being. And any person who believes that someone else is doing it for them is terribly mistaken, because we could see people spiraling into the distress and the despair that comes about from not being connected to God Almighty. So therefore, our responsibility is to reach out to every single human being tonight, or today, every moment, to spread the word, to speak with a smile, to have something kind to say to a person, but not just suffice by saying good morning, but to talk to them about the fact that their good morning is as a result of God Almighty creating them and creating their family, and that He wants them to bring children into the world, and He wants them to be righteous and kind, and to do what's right by God and right by men. So God willing, we should experience the fulfillment of this when there will be a complete experience of what the experience of Mount Sinai will be experienced by all of humanity with the coming of the redemption, the coming of the righteous Redeemer. May it happen speedily. Everyone should have a good Shabbos, and we should joyously celebrate the recognition that we have a Creator, a God Almighty, that's interested in us, that He cares about us, that it does make a difference, and He lovingly looks for us to learn from our errors, to realize that He is with us. He's giving us strength even in the midst of the errors. He's giving us the life force even in the midst of the errors. So He knows everything. There's nothing we have to be afraid of discussing with Him, because He's with us at every moment. So therefore, all we need to do is say, you know what? I recognize I'd like to live in accordance with that life energy. And that, my friends, is the life of tranquility and the life of bliss, the life of goodness and love and kindness that is prophesied by all the prophets with the coming of Mashiach. May it happen now. Shabbos.